Welcome to another draw process, page 12 of episode 2 of my comic First Sun and Sword. Today, I'll draw the whole page, thumbnails and everything, and share my thoughts along the way. Okay, page 12. We're back to Sword, in the room, asleep. Sun is watching him, and he sees that coin necklace that was just in the dream, just in the memory. And he reaches for it, just curious about it, and that causes Sword to instinctively reach for it to protect it, and that knocks over the water bucket. And so Sun's going to realize, he's in a horrible position now because he wasn't supposed to leave the room, but he also had to keep giving water to Sword. Those were his instructions. And because of his curiosity and lack of, forethought, he has made a mess of it. And that's what's going to set us up for his story in this issue, of getting into trouble and having to deal with it on his own in a way. And it mirrors the story of, in a way, the story of Sword's childhood, which has been partly conveyed in the issue. As I've spent some time this week finishing up the script, spent quite a bit of time finishing up the script. I just had a rough idea of what was going to happen and not a great ending yet. And that resulted in a lot of revisions for everything after this point, of course. And I knew I needed to do that. It feels a little risky to be drawing a comic that has an unfinished script. But I can also trust myself. I'm working for myself. It's not going to hurt anybody but me. And I wanted to get it started. And I knew that I had a solid enough intro that it wouldn't be a problem. It wouldn't be impossible to work with, what I'd established. So finished it up at this point because I was reaching, the point of no return, where the story's really getting underway at this point. And now I'm pretty happy with it. It's pretty solid at this point, and I'm going to share how I wrote it and organize it on my blog, where I shared about the coloring changes I made. There's just things I can share on the blog that are hard to share in these videos. So, the pencils. One thing I'll point out here is the way that I am changing up the pattern of the panels is intentional. There are 4 panels in the top row, 3 in the middle, and 3 in the bottom. I have said it here before, but I'm not a big fan of clear grids. I don't like my grids to align. I think a new way of saying that is a horizontal row is one block of information. It is read left to right, and they're the most naturally grouped. It's like a sentence or a paragraph. And when I look at a page that has every row is the same, size and shape, then it seems like they're all saying the same thing. There should be variation. Like in our language, word by word, there's a change in the sounds and the shape of how that, is coming to be. So it's more interesting that way. So these first 4 panels, it's actually 3 panels in a way. The middle 2 panels are just one image that is cut down the middle and separated by a gutter. Sword laying there and Sun behind him with a little bit of an establishing shot. That's one image. but I have it broken up this way for the flow of the page, and also because I kind of like doing that sometimes. When you take an image and break it up into panels, you slow the reader down. They're going to look at each piece of it instead of looking at it as a whole. So you can get them to look at one character's face or something, then the other thing or face. So it does affect the way it's read. So we have this series of information. The coin on his neck, sword's asleep, son is, serving him water or about to, and then son looks down and sees the coin and gets an idea. That is the information, that is the story conveyed in this first row of panels. I made sure to get from the start to end point of that story in this one horizontal row. In the past, I was not good about this. I would have shown his face in this last panel. I would have just put it on the start of the next row and not thought about how that doesn't group well with that. It would be like putting paragraph breaks in your story, in your essay, at random points. It wouldn't make sense. It doesn't flow. It misgroups. It misorganizes things. So, really, that's something I've really definitely improved in and made intentional. This 3 panels, son's hand grabbing the necklace, sword snatching his hand instinctively while still asleep, and that causing the bucket to fall, surprising the son and the bucket falling. It is, ABC, antecedent behavior consequence or whatever. So one group of information on the one row. There's also sort of a poetry, since I used that already as the idea of this poetry of the grouping of things. There's a poetry to the shapes in the panels and the size of the panels, obviously. The first 2 rows have panels that are all the same size as each other. So the first one's 4 beats, 4/4 time. Then we got 3/4 time, 3 beats. This one has a large chunk, and then one that is, 40% smaller, 30% smaller, and then another 30% smaller. So they still have a relationship to each other. Each panel has a relationship to the whole and to the one before it. But it's not one that's of equals. That was partly because I don't want it to look like a grid with the row above it. I want variation. But it also serves what I'm trying to show. The first image is the big image of the bucket of water on the floor, the establishing shot, and the moment where he probably pauses and you just see that bucket roll out. It makes sense to make that the large panel. And then slightly smaller, the 2-person shot of sword and son looking at sword mumbling in his sleep. He's still asleep. And then a nice, tight, small panel of just son's expression. That last panel is the same size as the last panel on the first row. So we've kind of gone full circle from his, curious, looking down curiously at an object he wants to touch. He was told not to touch something in the first story, so that's kind of funny. But, starting with that face there at the top right, and then the bottom right, the other face, the resulting face. even when I color these panels, there's a certain flow to the colors. And there's a flow to the poetry, the shape of the positive and negative space, I guess. If you thought of each of these drawings in each panel as just like some blob of positive versus negative space, there's some structure to it that you can perceive. Like the first panel here has the mass of Sword's beard on the top left, and that joins with the coin. Here's an even better example with this row. There's a real diagonal that's mostly on the bottom. So the bottom half with the top left quarter is all positive space, negative in the top right quarter. But that chunk at that angle continues in the next panel, but it's a little smaller. And then it's even smaller. Then we have, where once on the third panel you're down to Sword's body laying down, you can almost see this like slope coming down off of the mountain. This hill, this slope from the first panel down to the more level last panel. Of course, with Sun standing above it. Sun, his surprise with the bucket spilling, fills the negative space that has been growing since the first panel. When I say that, maybe it sounds like I'm really smart, that I am thinking of all these things ahead of time and it's just so genius. It is not forethought. It is instinctive. It is discovery as you draw. And then it's just, once you describe it, you're like, oh, that sounds solid. And yeah, I'm very glad that I get to talk on these videos, that I get to process and think about what these instincts are that I'm engaged in and these choices I'm engaged in. Because by accounting for them, I become aware of them and they become intentional, and I can develop them, I can shape them towards my goals. I think this leads me into the topic I had in mind of how do we talk about what we do. If you are a comic book creator or an aspiring one, especially if you're creating a comic, you're an artist creating illustrations, how do you talk about what it is that you do? And it is a very complicated question once you introduce marketing and I guess we'll just call it marketing. When you introduce money into the picture, it corrupts things. If you think of a philosopher that is worried about tenure and has, they've been building a set of ideas, writing on certain topics that make money, that are popular, or that they've built their reputation on, they have to stick to those topics. They got to stick to that. Can you really think that they are a honest, voice that's impartial? It's like a politician once they've taken money. Can you trust that they're really speaking from a place of freedom and their own opinion? Maybe not so much at a certain point. And it's the same thing where money can corrupt with your art, how you draw, how you present it, and how you talk about it. being shaped by something other than your authentic self-expression, your authentic creative, drive. If you imagine, being highly accomplished in your field, in this case, creating comics, and highly recognized for your accomplishments, it's very seasoned in it, and successful in it, even let's say financially, if that's the case, if that's your goal, then it's just a thought experiment, but I can imagine myself being much more free than I would otherwise be. Free to speak my opinion and to develop my opinions. Free to draw however I want, the way I want, and to develop the way that I draw. See, I would improve through that process. You'll develop your opinions. You'll develop the way you draw. But I would feel free to do it. If I'm drawing a comic and I want to change the tools I'm using and change how I'm drawing it halfway through, I can do that. Nobody can tell me no because I'm the seasoned expert and I can just do what I want. And I can create for myself because I'm not worried about the money because that's already taken care of, and just create what I want. If you're an indie creator who's not making money from your creating or not making a decent amount, like a real income you're living on from your work, which that applies to me, then you're like the master. You're like the seasoned expert that is free to make whatever they want. Many others would be envious of the freedom that you have, and they wish that, professionals in the field, they wish that they could make what they want and get the time to make what they want, just the way you struggle to make the time when you have a day job to make your comic, but even the professional could do that. So being on the outside and being financially independent, you have an incredible amount of freedom to be, to create authentically from passion. And that's what the world needs, is more passionate, created things that are created from passion and freedom to develop in a unique way towards unique ends, and not just the same. And we're free to do that. The problem is we don't trust ourselves, we don't believe in ourselves, we don't feel confident, proud. So we don't speak up. And then we don't develop our opinions. We don't develop our art style. We don't develop in that direction that increases our passion and creativity. So, I've said it before. I wish that I had started sharing how I draw and what I'm struggling with from day one. I wish I could go back and see 8 years of my progress and process and just went all in on it, because I would be better than I am now. I would have made more of a difference and helped others more than I have now. It would be it'd be a gift to the community, and to humanity, and to myself. And, but I didn't, I waited until I felt a little more, capable, experienced, okay, now I've got some confidence, now I can share. And, never enough. There's never enough confidence. And that's the problem. You can chase that success and to reach the status of mastery, and all the money and praise you could want. You can chase that the rest of your life, and who's to say if you'll really attain it or be happy when you did? But I make the case for this path that I'm on of self-expressive works, because you can't fail at this path. You may fail in the sense that people may not like, there may not be very many people that seem to like what you make. People may not understand it or whatever. But in the end, on your deathbed, you know that you were engaging in an honest attempt to become the artist that you can become, the creator that you can become. That when you sacrificed and gave yourself for your creation, that it was what, was from a place of authenticity, from passion, from a genuine, curiosity to see how it unfolds, not a fighting and forcing it to be something. Back on topic, so how we talk about what we do. The case I'm making here is that we should be talking about it now, like when we're more of a beginner even still. And it should be from a place of humility, that we're not experts, but authentically what we're experiencing and doing and struggling with, learning. And there's the myth of the artist that just goes into their room alone and slaves away, and then they don't emerge until they've reached some level of expertise. They're a master, and now they can come out and bestow it down on the masses. But I don't think that's how it works. I think that the best art has occurred in small communities where artists were, pushing each other and developing each other and engaged together in that process. That's why you need to be talking about what you do, and you need to find people to talk to that care, and ideally other artists. Study any movement, the Renaissance, any intellectual movement. There's always the happening places where people were engaged in culture. So why not just talk about it from that place to the audience of your peers about what you're really doing and really care about. Yeah, I know that that's just a small piece of this topic of how do you talk about what you do, because of course we also make stories and books, and how do we talk about the stories that we do? I imagine you're making them for people. I mean, it's for yourself, but it's for others too. And so how, what people want your book, what people need to know, what people would you want to reach with your message about what your book's about, so that you can give them something they're waiting for, So there's definitely a lot more to the topic. how to talk about the work itself. Maybe I'll have time for that next week. The updated colors. If you've watched earlier videos and you saw the more gold colors, I have updated the colors to the whole thing. Just once I had more pages done, I looked at it and I made some decisions to update it. It's a living document at this point until it's printed. There's the finished page. Simple flat colors. Used the G pin for the first time, the nib. Jumped right in, and very, very good experience with it. I knew it felt right to do. It just felt so natural for me. It seemed to match my penciling style much better. And even though I'm not good at it yet, I'm not very natural with it. It still feels more natural than the Micron. And I think it looks enough like the prior pages that were done with Micron. Obviously, it's going to look different at this point. It is not, going to be a perfect book, because it's going to have that inconsistency that's introduced right here on page 12. But that happened in the first book too, that as I developed, things changed. That's more important to me than the perfect book, is getting that development accomplished. We'll be in a different place on the third book and on the fourth, and I hope to continue to improve and grow and change. You do the same. I'll see you next week.